Excuse me, hello. I'm Flo from Progressive, and did you know...
No, I'm just waiting for the bus.
So then you have time to hear about how with Home Quote Explorer, you can check if you're paying too much for home insurance.
Yeah, if I was interested in talking to you, which I'm not.
Okay, I'll do the talking, and you just check if you can be saving, which is going to be pretty hard to do if you put on your headphones. Okay.
See if you're paying too much for home insurance with Home Quote Explorer. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations.
Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenido to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south. In the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 7th, 2021. Ronald Deportes, bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton's sitting around here thinking about the sports world. It's like the book, the never-ending story. When one part ends, another one begins. We've lost college basketball, but we got the NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey still going on, Charlton. Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers for always continuing to go on. Our nurses, doctors, and first responders.
Yep.
They make sure that all of us stay healthy and safe to be able to watch those sporting events.
Watching those sporting events, staying healthy and safe. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. When you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I love pausing Big C, but I never want to pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, Charlton, as we look at each sports season come to an end and we look forward to the following year, unfortunately, suicide has not come to an end in this country, Charlton, and we lose over 24 veterans a day to that horrific disease. I know people are always enamored with everything that they see on television and read the papers and listen to on the radio.
Yeah.
But listen to the plight of our veterans in this country, Charlton, because 24 veterans a day to suicide is a horrific loss that we should not be facing as a country. We give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, but it's never enough, Charlton. We need more participation from more Americans to make this worthy cause effective. Stopping veteran suicide and even everyday citizen suicide in America. You have to pay attention to the signs.
Yeah.
Help those people out who need a conversation. And if so, make that phone call and pass them the phone to give somebody to talk to that is a professional.
Very well said. I love doing our part. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255 and get some help. If you're online, you can simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. You can hopefully get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley, home with weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants, and the Say Hey Kid, as well as the Home Run King Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C Center. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country, helping put people back to work, just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it. Sports teams are doing it too. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to BigCSports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say play Big C Sports Podcast you will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world. And I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. You know, Big C, man, we give out the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and sometimes you just wonder what it keeps people going. You know, a lot of people have things that just make them go into the cave. They go into the tank. I was at the gas station today getting some gas, and this guy comes in, had a big smile on his face, and he hopped in under. He had a crutch under one arm, and he was just walking. He had one leg. I don't know if he was a veteran, but this guy was whistling and just hopping through the store, and he stood in line and he paid for his gasoline, and then he hopped back out and got into his car. I don't know if he'd been to war or what it was, but he took everything he had and he decided to enjoy the day. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, Charlton, I always look at the greatest part of my day is waking up. After that, I can deal with any downward trot that may come on, Charlton, but the biggest challenge is getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
And once you do that you've accomplished 99% of the success for your day.
Yeah.
And anything can be accomplished.
Anything can be accomplished. I wish everybody nothing but the best, but you got to rise and shine no matter what you're going through. I remember watching Jack LaLanne doing his thing. I think he was up into his 90s, and he was still trying to exercise. But seeing a man, and he wasn't an old guy, young guy with one leg and a crutch, really gave me some motivation to stop complaining about my own aches and pains. It's all fair in love and war. I know college basketball, Big C, there's always joy and pain, sunshine and rain. I believe the great big Frankie Beverly sang that song, Joy and Pain. It like sunshine and rain. You think about Gonzaga Bulldogs, Big C, they had a great season, but they fell short adding to the names of the teams that were undefeated in the men's tournaments, Big C, that ended up not having all the joy, but they had a lot of pain, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at just the joy of getting to the tournament, Charlton, there were 68 celebratory universities that made it into March Madness, Charlton, and ultimately we know every year only one team is going to host that championship trophy.
Yeah.
And it's a great battle to make it to that final two teams in the tournament, Charlton. You
Yep.
think about all the combatants that you have to go with, those disappointed individuals that you left in your wake getting there.
Yeah.
And even when you lose in the championship game, I know there's always a lot of aspirations about being there and people always feeling that they're the best. But we can only have one champion.
Yep.
And you have to give all the accolades in the world to that team who finally wins the championship. And that happened to beat Baylor in 2021.
That one shiny moment belonged to the Baylor Bears. It's all fair and love and war. I did my first college basketball game. Actually, it was not my first college basketball game, but it was my first year of doing college basketball broadcast at the University of San Francisco Dons. They were playing the Pepperdine program from Southern California, and I would never forget, that gym is not the biggest gym up on the hill in San Francisco, Big C, but I did see banners with K.C. Jones hanging up and the great Bill Russell. It's all fair in love and war, but there's a lot of history at that program in San Francisco. 1956, Big C, San Francisco, the great Bill Russell actually led the Dons to 2 national titles, but also USF lost once in the early part of the year. It was a 1954-1955 campaign. They lost to UCLA before claiming its first crown. Talk about 2 excellent programs with history, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about the Dons, and they were the premier program in the 50s on the West Coast with the great players that they had during that generation. They had some rejuvenation in the late 70s when they had Bill Cartwright, James Hardy in that group,
Yeah.
who made it into the college football playoffs during the March Madness, Charlton. And
Yeah.
at one point, they were the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yeah, college basketball playoffs, all fair and love and war, Big C. And I think about the second championship that run concluded. It was an 83-71 win against Iowa to finish a perfect 29-0. So it's ironic that you had 2 teams. I mean, a lot of teams have tried to go undefeated and they just got hung up at the end of the road, Big C, coming to the end of the road. But at the same time, from that West Coast Conference, University of San Francisco, and then Gonzaga this year. But the Dons were 29-0, and they were able to cut down the nets, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that's back in the era where the Sweet 16 was the entire tournament, Charlton, where you only had 16 participants.
Yeah.
So your path to the Final Four and the championship was not as egregious and tumultuous during those years.
Yeah.
But it was a championship nevertheless.
Yeah, still the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat is all fair and level. We're going way back to 1957, the great North Carolina Big C. Just a year later, Frank McGuire, he coached the Tar Heels to a 32-0 campaign. His team had to work overtime to do it, Big C. A lot of overtime. UNC outlasted the great Kansas program that featured the greatest basketball player ever to come out of that university and maybe the second greatest basketball player ever to play with the Los Angeles Lakers. That's Wilt the Stewart Chamberlain. It was a 54-53. It was 3 extra sessions, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about that. You go 54 points in 3 overtime sessions, Charlton. This is the pre-shot clock era. And Tar Heels back in that era and even into the 70s were renowned for having a 4-corner offense where they just wanted to slow the clock down, Charlton, and take all the offensive possessions out of their opponent's hands.
Yeah.
So everyone knew that Wilt was the most dominant player in college basketball during that era, and so you wanted to limit the shot opportunities for him.
Yeah, could you imagine how great we call players nowadays, and whether it's Timmy down there for the University of Gonzaga or whoever they want to crown as one of the top players in college basketball. Just imagine what people saw when they saw guys like Russell and they saw guys like Chamberlain play. It's amazing how basketball always gets better as you look at TV, but when you look at the history, some of the greatest players, Big C, they've already laced up the sneakers a long time ago. But the Tar Heels also needed triple overtime to get past Michigan State in the semifinals. I want to take you to 1964, Big C, the great UCLA Bruins. And so come the late John Wooden era. If you think about what they did, 11 national titles under his belt, Big C, is amazing. The Wizard of Westwood had 10 title teams, and one features the Walt Hazzard and Gail Goodrich, Big C, who closed out a 30-0 campaign with a 98-93. It was actually 98-83 triumph against the Duke Blue Devils in the final, Big C. Your thoughts?
You know, and both of those players went on to have illustrious careers in the NBA. Walt Hazzard was a tremendous guard. Gail Goodrich stayed right there at home in Westwood, Charlton, and was a member of the Lakers' first championship team in 1971.
Yeah, it's amazing how much success that UCLA program has had over the years, but we got to be real. Most of it came under the great late John Wooden, Big C. Lavin's done his thing, and Cronin's going to do his thing. I think UCLA will be one of the top 5 teams in the country next year. They're going to have more recruits too. But going back to their past, 1967, the great UCLA program, Big C, the Bruins were amazing. It was the first of 3 championships for the Bruins, with the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then known as the great Lou Alcindor. In the middle, the Bruins wrapped up a perfect 30-0 slate, and with 4 Final Four wins against Houston and also Dayton, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Kareem and Lou Alcindor as the same individual, Charlton, he was the most dominant player possibly in college basketball history. The game had been altered because of his dominance.
Yeah.
And, you know, he took away the dunk shot. Freshmen were not allowed to play varsity basketball in that era. So he was only limited to 3 championships, Charlton, where he most likely would have been 4 because his freshman team beat the previous year's national championship team, the UCLA Bruins, when they first played him in a scrimmage.
Yeah, it's all fair and level war. There's been so many great athletes that have walked around the campus in Southern California, Big C, and Westwood. And when you think about the 1972 teams, I don't think anyone understood how eccentric the great Bill Walton was. And maybe it started back in then before a lot of things were legal, if that makes sense to you, Big C. But the great Bill Walton, not only was he eccentric off the court, he was eccentric on the court the way he is in his broadcast. But it was the Bill Walton's first title team with the UCLA Bruins, Big C. Though he had help for many years from the great senior Henry Bibby, Big C. The first back-to-back 30-0 seasons wrapped up with an 81-76 championship game victory against the great Florida State back in the day, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that was an outstanding team. You had Bibby at guard, you had Pete Turgelich at forward, Bill Walton at center, Charlton. You had a 3-headed monster out there in Westwood that nobody could contend with. This team went on an 88-game winning streak in
Yeah.
college basketball.
Yeah.
The longest in men's history.
Yeah, and they said it was snapped by Notre Dame, and there was about 20 uncalled fouls according to the people in Westwood. It's all fair level war. There's a reason Touchdown Jesus is outside of that Notre Dame campus. I guess people could always go and ask for forgiveness. It's all fair 11 war, but that streak should have carried on. But you know, sometimes a foul is not a foul. If a tree falls from the forest and it doesn't, no one hears it, does it make a sound? I guess not if you don't hear the slap on the arm. It's all fair 11 war. Going back, Big C, 1973, under the great Bill Walton and the Bruins, they polished off another clean slate. It was an 87-66 drubbing of Memphis. Think about how dominant the Baylor Bears beat the Gonzaga Bulldogs in this championship game. UCLA beat Memphis 87-66. It was Coach John Wooden's a 7th consecutive championship that will most likely, I hate saying never, but that's pretty close to never going to be duplicated. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I don't know if anybody will ever get to the 10 national championships that Wood had. And like I said, it was a much easier road early on in his career to make it to the final game because there was only 16 games being played.
Yep.
This was one of the more memorable championships that he had because Bill Walton set the percentage record from shooting from the floor. He was 21 of 22 in the game, Charlton, scoring 44 points. And his opponent, Larry Keenan from Memphis, also had a great game, scoring 35.
Yeah.
But probably the most memorable game that I can remember in NCAA tournament history was the following year when UCLA lost to North Carolina State in overtime, and the battle between Bill Walton and David Thompson, Charlton.
Yeah.
One of the most memorable performances in NCAA basketball history.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we've seen success with this great program. They're great players that went on to become, many of them, Hall of Fame players in the world of the NBA. But Big C, also want to take in 1973 at UCLA and the Walton. They polished off another clean slate. As I mentioned, it was 87-66 over Memphis. But isn't it amazing that Memphis won their own NIT tournament this year, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, it's a rejuvenation of the program, of one of their alumnus being the coach of that program now, Penny Hardaway. Charlton had success at Memphis and in the NBA, and now he has kids coming back to his alma mater.
Yep, so UCLA made the Final Four in 2021, and Memphis ended up winning the NIT also in 2021. Their paths crossed in 1973, and UCLA got the best of them with a 21-point win. Going to 1976, we just finished celebrating in the beautiful city of Indianapolis, Indiana, Big C. The 1976 Indiana Hoosiers, Big C, now in the 32-team era, so they increased the tournament. The great Bob Knight, who never saw a chair that he didn't want to throw at somebody, Big C, if that makes sense to you. And the great Indiana Hoosiers, they needed 5 tournament wins to claim the title, but all of the all-star players, that squad was amazing, featuring the likes of Quentin Buckner, Big C, the great Quint Benson, Scott May, and also they took down the great UCLA in the Final Four, and then closed it out with an 86-68 triumph against their league rival, the great Michigan Wolverines. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, a tremendous team. You didn't mention Tim Stoddard, who went on the pitch with the Baltimore Orioles, and Mike Woodson, who was a guard, a 6'7" guard, who was drafted in the first round by the Chicago Bulls, and who was just named the head coach of his alma mater, Indiana University, just a week or so ago, Charlton. So you think about the rebound of that program, that they're trying to reach back into that 76 team, Charlton, to get that program back to the heights that it once was.
Yeah, they're trying to get back there, and isn't it amazing that Michigan is doing their thing this year? We know they got knocked out by UCLA, as we talked so much about UCLA and what they've done under the late, great John Wooden, Big C. But then also Michigan, for them to get back to the promised land this year, back to the NCAA tournament, I know a lot of people think about Michigan for that Fab Five, but they've been doing the same thing, which is winning championships, or at least getting close to them for many, many moons. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, every program has had a landscape change, Charlton, in college basketball. When you look at the equity across the country where kids can be seen on television regardless of where they play, they are no longer just driven to the larger universities thinking that's their only chance for success. As we look around the landscape of college basketball, it's about equality. This is the reason why you don't get repeat national champions any longer.
Yeah, and you're also seeing I mean, it's getting better. African-American coach Penny Hardaway wins a national championship at NIT. You had the University of Arizona and also South Carolina on the women's side having women coach their teams to the Final Four. And it's just a matter of time before more men of color get opportunities to try to cut down the nets. But on a couple of other occasions, when you think about an unbeaten squad that made it all the way to the last day of the dance, Big C, before tasting defeat, you have the great Larry Bird and Indiana State. They were stopped in the championship game by the great Magic Johnson, Big C, who went on to do so many great things in life, especially with the LA Lakers and 5 championships. And the Michigan State Spartans, that was a game that so many people were intrigued. Media tried to make it about black versus white, Larry Bird versus Magic, and I think that carried on in the NBA. But in 1979, and then Ohio State suffered its lone loss in the final to Cincinnati. That's going back to 1961, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about that Ohio State loss, Charlton, where they lost to the in-state rival University of Cincinnati. That team featured a few All-Americans. I remember John Lucas, who played center for Ohio State, also won an Olympic gold medal. And he ultimately, Charlton, went on in his NBA career to win a championship with the New York Knicks in 1973.
Yeah.
So that team hosted a lot of great players. The great Oscar Robertson was also on the University of Cincinnati team, Charlton, and he won an NBA title in Milwaukee with Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, with the great Lou Alcindor, Big C. So much has happened in the world of college sports, and I know a lot of people are thinking that we've seen such great basketball just this year, but it's gone on for many, many moons, and I really do appreciate all the great things that have happened in the world of college basketball. May those young men go on and do great things in life, and the young women go on and do great things in life, as women are starting to get also a lot of attention in the world of college basketball. Big C, I want to run to the NBA, and people can have good and bad luck in times. It's just a matter of what happens to them and how they follow through in life, making good choices and making good decisions. The great Paul George scored 36 points, and the Los Angeles Clippers rolled a franchise record 47 points in the first quarter of a 133-116 victory over the Portland Trail Blazers, and that happened last night. You have the great Kawhi Leonard, Big C. He dropped 29 points, 12 rebounds. He also had 7 assists, and the Clippers followed an 18-point rout of the defending champion, the Lakers, 2 days ago. Norman Powell dropped 32 points, and C.J. McCullough also added 24 points for the Blazers. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Blazers seem to be having a repeat of what they had last year in the latter part of the season, Charlton, on the outside of the bubble, trying to play themselves into one of those playoff spots.
Yeah.
But they seem to be getting cold at the wrong time of the season, and the Clippers were hot. They've taken that West Coast Conference, Charlton, and they seem to be kicking a little butt out there. They seem to be chasing, the Phoenix Suns, trying to get to that second spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, there's a big game tonight down in the desert, Big C. It's going to be hot down at Phoenix when the Jazz come to town. All fair and love and war. Can't wait to see that game as it tips off later tonight, Big C. But also, I want to keep you up on the West Coast, take you up to the beautiful city of San Francisco, California, and the gorgeous Chase Center just south of downtown, Big C, off the Embarcadero. The great Steph Curry, the 2-time MVP, led one of those furious finishes that defined the Golden State Warriors during the recent years of all the NBA Finals runs. Amazingly, I was watching the game against the Bucks, Big C, and I was a 10-point lead by the Bucks with I think there was about 4 minutes left. I decided I'd go up and take a shower. By the time I came down, there was 7 seconds left, and I think the game, Golden State was up by 1, so should I take more showers? Does that include, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, everyone understands that the last 2 minutes of an NBA game is the most dramatic, Charlton.
Yeah.
Generally, the first 45, 46 really don't matter.
Yeah.
Because players start launching the ball, and when you have Steph Curry out there sitting on that launching pad, anything can happen.
Yeah. He also had a padding on his backside. It's all fair level war, but he had that padding on his backside. He has a little tail contusion. It's like going through pain. The guy fights through pain, and when he's shooting the basket's Big C, it's just a great thing watching him feeling healthy. Can't wait till he gets his splash brother back, Big C. But I think about what Curry did. His father Dale played the NBA. He has a brother that also plays in the NBA. And his mother was a great athlete also. That's a very athletic family. But Curry knocked down a three-pointer with 106 to play on the way to 41 points with 5 three-pointers as his team came back late. And they worked until the final buzzer to snap a 3-game losing streak. And when I talk about snapping losing streaks, they were being wiped out by double digits. So last night was a much-needed win, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they're sitting there in the ninth spot in the West, Charlton, and every game counts. When you think about the number of games that Curry has missed, and without this guy on the starting lineup, Charlton, this is a team that's going to be in disarray all the time, but he's one of the pure leaders in the NBA.
Yeah, it looks like he's been lifting a little bit of weight, Big C. I think sometimes when he was out with the tailbone was hurt, maybe he was doing more push-ups. It's all fair and love and war. The great Chris Middleton for the Bucks, Big C, scored 28 points as Milwaukee again missed the big man, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then Holiday dropped in 29 points and knocked down back-to-back three-pointers that were not quite enough. When I look at what Holiday's doing, he also signed a major contract extension for himself, too, with Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about the Holiday family, Charlton. They have three brothers that are playing in the NBA at the same time. What proud parents, Mr. and Mr. Holiday are, with their sons playing in the NBA. And he's the highest paid of the three, Charlton, and he delivered last night. But without Giannis, this is a shell of their team.
Yeah, it's a shell of a team without the great Giannis. And every day is a holiday when the holidays go to the bank account. It's all fair and level war. I want to talk about another great player. And many people talk about maybe being an MVP conversation. And anyone can be in MVP conversation. It's kind of like going to a nightclub back in the day when people could go to a nightclub. And you're trying to look at who you want to dance with. A lot of people look like you might want to dance with them, but only one's going to get the dance at least at one time. The great Nikola Jokic, Big C, they call him the Joker. He dropped 27 points in 27 minutes, and the great Denver Nuggets pull the return of Jermaine Grant, Big C, and Mason Plumlee with a 134-119 beatdown of Detroit Pistons on Tuesday night. This team is starting to peak at the right time, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the Nuggets are always consistent. If you look at their records over the last 4 years, Jokic has been a staple. I know he always gets overlooked in the NBA conversation, Charlton, but who has been more consistent than him in the NBA over the last 4 years?
Yeah, I would say James Harden, LeBron James, maybe Steph Curry when he wasn't injured, but Giannis doing the same thing. The Claw, Kawhi, there's been a lot of great players. It's like, who do you dance with? There's so many to choose from, but he's definitely coming to the dance. The Nuggets got 25 points from the great Michael Porter Jr. and 24 from Will Barton, Big C. Denver led by as many as 28 points before they decided to sit their starters early in the second half. This is what looks good for them for the playoffs. But a lot like Portland, they look really good until you get them to the finals, and that's when things don't go the same. But Denver, when you think about this, we talk so much about UCLA and what they've done under the great late John Wooden. Denver has won 15 of 18. They've won 7 in a row, Big C. All 6 with the great Aaron Gordon in the lineup following the trade, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is why you have to look at Jokic points per minute. Not his total stats, Charlton, but his points and rebounds and assists per minute. And you'll find that they're higher than anybody in his position since Shaq in the NBA, Charlton.
Yeah. But, to put his name next to Shaq, Shaq had so many great people around him. And the Jokic is good, too. The Joker's doing his thing. But, we talked about the great Wilt Chamberlain when we were covering the college basketball, how he did his thing at Kansas. Talked about the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor. Talked about the great Bill Walton. And the big men that all have a ring on their finger, a championship ring on the finger, Big C. And I don't know if the Joker will ever get that. They look really good. But they remind me of Portland. When they get to the big dance, sometimes they just panic a little bit, or whatever happens, it hasn't happened for them, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you look at Marc Gasol, in Toronto. He has a ring on his finger. You could never classify him as a dominant big man in the NBA or any of those centers that were on the Warriors team.
Yeah.
They didn't play critical parts in those championships. But when you look at a guy who is a critical part of a franchise, Jokic is that. You may not always have all the tools around you, but your self-performance, Charlton, speaks for itself.
Yeah, it does. I still think that Murray is going to be the glue that carries that team. But the Joker's doing his thing. Wish them nothing but the best. I just don't think they'll get out of the West, but they'll most likely get close to the finals of the Western Conference. Don't think they'll come out of it. We've seen that before. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. When we come back, I want to talk more about some big-time players making big-time plays in the NBA. In the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C Pause, also known as the Big C Timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. I really want to appreciate Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say play Big C Sports Podcast, and you will see all of our apps pop up from all over the world. And I really do appreciate the growth with Big C Sports. And speaking of growing on things, Big C, going back to the NBA, the great Dillon Brooks, Big C, he scored a season-high 28 points. He was 10 for 16 shooting for the Memphis Grizzlies, Big C. Ended another Miami winning streak, beating the last year's league runner-up, the Miami Heat. It was 124-112 on Tuesday night. The great Jonas Valanciunas, Big C, dropped in 20 points and 10 rebounds. The great Kyle Anderson had 19 points, and Desmond Bain added 15 for the Grizzlies, who won their third straight game, and that's a big thing for Memphis, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they've been on a little roll lately, Charlton, and they have to keep that momentum going. Remember last year they was number 8 seed to get into the West in the bubble playoffs, and they expect to do better than that this year. Moran is a tremendous young leader of that Memphis Grizzly organization.
Yeah, and it's amazing because Miami still, they have such great shooters. They have a mentality, they have a makeup of a championship pedigree. They came up just short to the Lakers last year down in the bubble. The great Jimmy Butler, who's got a kind of a rags to riches story, Big C, he dropped 28 points, and he really, in my opinion, is the leader of that team, maybe the best leader that they've had since LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is a rebuilding Miami team, Charlton. It went further than anyone expected last year in the playoffs. They've been injured a lot earlier in the season, but they'll be back in the playoffs, and you have to worry about how good they will be at that point.
Yeah, you got to think about that. We talked about the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the great Wilt Chamberlain for college basketball, and the great Bill Walton, and Big C, the great Bill Russell. But when I think about the big guy, his name is Bam Adebayo. He was bamming people for 18 points for the Heat, and this is a guy that's a rebound, he's a rebound machine. He's also a great shot intimidator, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Bam Adebayo is still learning the game, Charlton. He's young. His legs have been a little injured this year, but they got to get a little more defensive presence down in Miami to advance far in the playoffs.
Yeah, they got to get some of that Pat Riley heat that he was bringing out to L.A. when they were winning championships, and even got back-to-back championships for the L.A. Lakers. Also in the NBA, just in the second game back after being sidelined with a bruised bone in his left knee, Big C, the great Joel Embiid, who at one time was playing like the MVP, was waiting for him to show up and accept it, Big C. He dropped 35 points. Philadelphia rolled to a 106-96 win over the Boston Celtics on Tuesday night. And the Celtics, when you think about the presence of Embiid and what he brings, the Celtics finished with an uncharacteristic 22 turnovers, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Embiid, being back in the lineup for the 76ers is a bright spot. If he could be as consistent as Jokic out there in Denver, Charlton, he would be the MVP of the NBA. But this is a guy that you can never count on to play a full season, and you never know when he's going to be out of the lineup.
You never know, but he is playing a lot better since he went to see the doctor. Or maybe the doctor came to see him, and the great Doc Rivers is all fair love and war. Nikolai Vucevic, Big C, looks as if he's finding his fit in Chicago. Just like going shoe shopping, you got to try on enough shoes to find one that fits. I think he's found a good pair of shoes in Chicago. On Tuesday, he took advantage of Indiana's missing a big man by posting 32 points, 17 Wilt Chamberlain-like rebounds, Big C, and that helped the great Chicago Bulls overwhelm a short-handed Indiana Pacers. It was 113-97. Now, when you think about Chicago, these are not Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Those days are gone. But Chicago has won 2 straight, which Michael Jordan would have laughed at, but 2 straight since snapping a 6-game losing streak, and they moved within 1 game of the Pacers for the number 9 spot in the Eastern Conference. And when you think about Vucevic, Big C, he also had 5 assists. He was 14 of 29 from the field. And the great all-star out of UCLA, the great Zach Levine, Big C, dropped 19 points. He had 8 rebounds and 6 assists, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a team that's going to build around Vucevic. They acquired him at the trade deadline from the Miami Heat. So now they have that franchise staple, Charlton, that they know is going to be consistent every night, points and rebound-wise.
Yeah.
He's a defensive presence also in the middle, Charlton. So Chicago can look forward to going out drafting some wingmen to help out the scoring.
Yeah, they got to get some wingmen to help out the scoring, Big C. I remember so many great games that I saw in Chicago when they played at the old United Center's All Fair and Love and War. And speaking of wings, I like chicken wings, Big C. Big C, I don't know if you like chicken wings the way I do. I like mine with the garlic chicken wings, but then I get them and I put a hot sauce on them. How do you like your chicken wings, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I like them plain for the most part. As long as you season them right in the batter that you dip them in, Charlton, they're great. Too much seasoning takes away from what the goodness of the wings are.
Yeah, well, that depends on the palate, Big C. I like to put sprinkles on my ice cream because sometimes it's just not sweet enough. But speaking of wings, taking those broken wings from back in the day, the great Trae Young, he's dropped 30 points, and he helped lead a third-quarter three-point barrage as the surging Atlanta Hawks that beat Zion Williamson and the New Orleans Pelicans 123-107 on Tuesday night. And when I think about this Hawk team, remember they had won 8 in a row with the great Nick McMillan coming out of the All-Star break, Big C, just after the All-Star break. And then they hit some turbulence when they got robbed. They got their wings clipped down in Los Angeles by the Clippers. And they've kind of been like an airplane going through turbulence up and down. Do you think they're able to turn the corner and get the wings fixed, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, a lot of people have to understand, Charlton, the Hawks were on an 8-game road trip. And when you're not getting an opportunity to sleep in that bed at home, sometimes your game gets a little thrown off with those hotel bedrooms.
Yeah.
Now that at the end of that road trip, Charlton, maybe they can find some smooth gliding and get back on another wet street for Nate McMillan.
Yeah, the worst airplane or the worst airport I ever have flown out of is Denver. I don't know why they put it out there in the mountains. I guess they didn't have much of a choice, but it feels like you're at an amusement park and you're wondering if that plane's going to take off once it gets to climbing into altitude. A lot of turbulence coming out of Denver, and sometimes the Hawks have had their own turbulence. But it's all fair and love and war. Big C, there's also some turbulence when you look at Southern California, and this is a team, they need their superstars. They need LeBron James. They need Anthony Davis. They need their core players if they're going to make a run in the playoffs. We know they're going to get to the playoffs. It's about, will they stabilize that turbulence before they get there? So the Lakers made 18 three-pointers. If they could do that every night, then I think they'd be one of the top 2 seeds in the whole league, Big C. But including 7 of their first 8 attempts, Big C, and a 110-101 win over the Toronto Raptors on Tuesday night. But this is like the airplane turbulence. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's rocky. The Lakers built a 34-point lead in the first 20 minutes, and they were never threatened in the second half, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is what the Lakers have been looking for, is outside shooting, Charlton, all year long. And they seem to have found their stride last night in their victory with that huge lead in the first half.
Yeah.
It's a matter, can they continue doing the outside shooting once they get James and Davis back? And I'm not so sure that Davis will come back even for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But those players, Charlton, take the shots out of the outside shooter's hands, and so can they find an equal balance?
Yeah, they're going to have to find an equal balance, Big C, just like an airplane has to climb above that turbulence. So when you think about that, and you look at the NBA's best win records over the last 2 months, again, it's just like anything else in life, is what have you done for me lately? But I look at the Suns in that big game they have coming up tonight down in Phoenix. They're going to welcome in, I don't know if they're going to welcome these guys in, but they did let the Utah Jazz enter the building, Big C. The Suns 23-5. The Nets are posted a 21-6 record, Big C. The Jazz are 20-7. And then the Denver Nuggets are coming on strong. They're 20-9. And the great Dallas Mavericks, they're 19-7. Don't have quite 20 wins yet, but they may get it soon. And in the last 2 months, that's been the records. Give me your feeling on which one's more impressive, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, they're all impressive. You know, if you want to look at the power ranking of the NBA, you have to look no further than these 5 teams, because they have dominated over the last 2 months, and that's what basketball is all about. You can talk about the first 3 weeks of the season and somebody getting off to a fast start, but it's how you finish. And if you look at these 5 teams, Charlton, how they are finishing going into the second half of the season is what shows them as being the most dominant teams in the NBA. I know people have different looks at power rankings, but you just stated the most powerful 5 teams in the NBA right now.
Yeah, right now, and it's like right here, right now, is when it all matters the most. And thinking about Denver, since they've had their trade, Big C, I think about, just going back to the guy you were talking about, the great Nikolai Jokic, Big C, they call him the Joker. He's been the MVP all along for that team. I don't think he's the MVP of the league. I think there's too many other great players, especially James Harden and even Giannis and Embiid when he's doing his thing. But everybody has their own opinion about which Kool-Aid tastes the best. But when the other Nuggets struggled early on, the big man kept them afloat at 7. I think it's 7-7 by averaging a triple-double during those first 14 games. So they went 7-7, but he, a lot like James Harden, his play didn't drop down. Since Denver has won 2/3 of its games and sits at 29-18, Big C, the Joker's averaging 27 points a game, 11 rebounds, 8.5 per game, 51% shooting percentage from the floor, 43% from deep. That's not bad for a slow-footed NBA center that a lot of people says has great passing skills. He's in a position that hasn't claimed the most valuable player since 2000 when Shaq won it, Big C. But Shaq was also robbed twice by a guy that I won't mention because his alma mater is playing tonight, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, when you look at a player and what he means to a team, I think so many people who watch the NBA are enamored by the highlight reel, the flash plays, and they say, wow, you know, but they forget how those flash plays happen is that your team has to get a rebound.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have someone generally giving assist. But when you think about Nikolai Jokic doing all three, Charlton, has the trifecta in basketball as far as proficiency, points per game, rebounds per game, Charlton, assists per game. You can't find another big man in the NBA. He may not be going down getting on the highlight dunk reel,
yeah, right.
But when you look at the scorer's box at the end of the night, you're going to be hard-pressed to find other players that are outperforming him.
Yeah, his highlights a lot like Larry Bird. Big C, we talked about the great Larry Bird and how Larry Bird made a highlight reel, but it wasn't for his slam dunks. He made highlights for knocking in the basket and also great passing and not the best defense, but he was always kind of a quiet highlight reel, and that reminds me of the Joker. But when you think about more of historical context, this season currently ranks, in my opinion, as one of the 6th best of all time, trailing only LeBron James in 2008-2009 season. And as a trio of Michael Jordan's campaigns and the great Steph Curry, the only unanimous MVP ever in the NBA. And plus, you have plus or minus measures, Big C, which are players' box scores, contributions to his team while on the court. But I still say, for Denver, yeah, he's probably the best big man they've ever had in Denver, one of the best big men on the West Coast in the Western Conference. But MVP, I still don't say he's as quite as talented as what the Joker's is. You know, he's done his thing in Denver, but not like Giannis Antetokounmpo, not like Joel Embiid, and definitely not like James Harden this year. And even LeBron, when LeBron's healthy, Big C, your thoughts?
But see, you're talking about those games because of game highlights, Dalton, when you mention those other players. You can't say that those other players have outperformed him. You just spoke about the statistics that speak for himself. His statistics right now are in the top 6 all time in an NBA season.
Yeah.
So what's the criteria of becoming an MVP? Is it the amount of dunks that you have in the NBA, Dalton? Is it the amount of times that an announcer mentions your name? Because no player gets his name mentioned more in a contest than Jokic when you think about the times that he touches the ball. And if you want to compare him to Giannis Antetokounmpo, Charlton, straight up statistics, he outnumbers him 7-11, Charlton, plus minus. When you think about that, he dominates Giannis in the plus minus department in the NBA.
So if you were starting a league or a team today, give me the first player you would bring to your team to build Big C's basketball team. Big C, your thoughts?
I'm going to go with Steph Curry, but that's not what we're talking about in building a team. We're talking about right now. When they say the NBA's best player right now, that's not starting a team. That's a player that's on an existing team and what his contributions have been to the team. You just named it earlier that Denver, I believe was 20-9 in the last 2 months of the season.
Yeah.
Those other players that you mentioned, other than James Harden, who has now gotten a little banged up in New Jersey with the Brooklyn Nets,
yeah,
is going to be out for a few games. But those other players that you mentioned, they're not in that conversation. LeBron's not in that conversation about having his team as the winner. Giannis is not in that conversation. Embiid is not in that conversation. Even Steph Curry is not in that conversation. The conversation is about, when you talk about most valuable player, and what they mean to a team, Charlton. And that's where Jokic is coming into the conversation.
Yeah, I'd make him maybe the MVP of Denver, but I mean, he's a good player, but I'm not going to call him the best, not even in the Western Conference, let alone the whole league. But
so if he was to somehow win the MVP based on his statistical numbers, and that's how James Harden won the MVP based on his statistical numbers, that's how Russell Westbrook won the MVP based on their statistical numbers, averaging triple-double. And if Jokic gets to that point and is named the MVP, you're going to say all the media writers were wrong by naming him the MVP of the league?
Yeah, I would, because be honest, Big C, he's not the MVP of the league. He may have good numbers for the team that he's on, and he fits in well. He's like Timmy up there at Gonzaga. You can't tell me that Timmy's the best player in all of college basketball, but he might be the second best player on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. But again, everybody has their own flavor of Kool-Aid, but no one in the universe can say that Jokic is the best player in the NBA. Just my opinion, and that's what I'm sticking to. But I do want to touch on tonight's game. Tonight's game, there's a lot of good games played in the NBA tonight, Big C. Minnesota's at Indiana. You have Washington at Orlando. The New York Knicks are at Boston. Big C, if Boston gets had by the New York Knicks, they're at TD Gardens in Boston. This is the team. I mean, at some point in time, people say, don't blame the coach, don't blame the coach. But at some point in time, do they got to find a different coach to motivate the players if they can't beat the Knicks and they just got had earlier this week? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you got to think about how good the Knicks are. I mean, they brought in the new coach in New York, Charlton, and he's had this team as high as fourth ranked in the Eastern Division. You can't sit there and think that the Knicks are the Knicks of 10 years ago. This franchise has changed.
Yeah.
They've been rejuvenated, just like Boston was 3 years ago when they made it to the Eastern Conference Final. You have to understand nobody stands pat in the NBA. Should the Golden State Warriors be looking for a new coach now that they're in the 10th spot out in the West? Is Steve Kerr, is his time passed in Golden State? You have to look at where a team is fit at, and you can't think that everybody is the most valuable player in the NBA.
Yeah, but
everybody's getting paid, and they're going out there trying to win.
Yeah, but you can't put Steve Kerr in that conversation. They went to 5 straight NBA finals. He's 3-2 in those finals, and the ones that they lost, you know, LeBron had a great comeback. They were down 3-1, and everybody was injured versus Toronto, so they probably would have won that game, even had Kevin Durant not got injured. And then Klay Thompson got injured.
If the dog hadn't stopped to take his squat, he'd have caught the rabbit also.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm talking about facts and common sense. You can't put Steve Kerr with 5 championship appearances straight, and the only time they didn't win.
But if you say facts and common sense, you have to talk about their record right now. You have to talk about their record last year. That's facts and common sense.
No, it's not.
So if you're going to base everything on facts and common sense instead of the adhere moment, then you have to put everybody in that category. You always say, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Kerr has not won lately.
Yeah, but you can't say that. You cannot say that Stevens and Steve Kerr should be under the same scrutiny. When's the last time the Stevens been to an NBA Finals, Big C? Your thoughts?
Like you said, you can't put everybody under the same scrutiny. How many teams every year make it to an NBA Final? So if that's the case, everybody that LeBron played for and lost should have got fired. I mean, Doc Rivers got sent to Philadelphia because he's never made it to an NBA Final on the West Coast. I mean, we have a round table of NBA coaches. Every year, Charlton, there's 28 NBA coaches that don't make it to an NBA Final.
Yeah.
Are they all deserving of being fired?
Yeah, I don't think you can find any person on the planet outside of yourself that would say Steve Kerr and Stevens should be under the same scrutiny. You just can't do that. But that's my opinion, Big C. And if Boston loses tonight, I do believe you're going to start hearing more of that conversation coming out of the East Coast. And then we're going to go to your favorite team before people were banged up. And who knows if Durant's going to be putting on his slippers tonight or not. Supposed to be coming back this week. But you have New Orleans, the Pelicans. They're going into Brooklyn. And if they don't eat that deep fried food, they're probably going to lose anyway, Big C. But give me your thought on the great Brooklyn Nets with the injured James Harden. Your thoughts?
Well, James Harden will be out of the lineup tonight. Kevin Durant will be back in the lineup tonight. Kyrie Irving, you know, when he and Durant play together, Charlton, it's not the most accurate of relationships where they can coexist.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be about who can get the most shots off. But when you think about it, the Nets should easily win this game regardless.
Yeah, they should. But you got a Durant coming back, and he's rusty. And you just never know. You never know when a guy is off for almost a whole 2 months, Big C. Memphis at Atlanta. I think Atlanta got their wings back. But you got to be careful when a Bear or a Grizzly shows up, as Baylor attests to. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at this team, Charlton, it's about talent.
Yeah.
You know, if Lonzo Ball can get hot from the outside, they can create havoc for the net.
Yeah, they can create some havoc, Big C. And then you also have Dallas playing at Houston, Charlotte playing at OKC, San Antonio, at Denver to see the great Jokers against, the San Antonio team. Coach Pop will do his thing. Most likely Denver gets a win. But the greatest game tonight on schedule, and it could be like the NBA, like last year we were thinking it was going to be a great NBA Finals. We're going to have the Milwaukee Bucks playing the LA Lakers, but it didn't happen. And so one of these teams, also like the Bucks, were favored to win so many times in a row. Utah hasn't done their thing since the great Karl Malone left town, and Phoenix hasn't done their thing in many, many moons, Big C. But Utah is in Phoenix tonight. I hear that they're going to turn up the heat inside of the arena tonight, Big C. Your thoughts?
This should be a competitive game when you look at what most of these teams have done for the past 2 months as far as the winning streak. Phoenix right now is the top team in the NBA when you think about power rankings. They have the best record over the last 2 months.
Yeah.
When you think about Utah, they're nipping at their heels. So the two excellent teams.
Yeah.
Should be a fine contest. Even though I like the contest with Boston and New York, I think that's the marquee matchup in the night in the NBA. Sometimes the West Coast takes the back seat. I mean, if you think of that game last night with Golden State, who would have thought that it would have been as electrifying as it was, and it wasn't considered by fans being the top game. But all of these guys are competitors. They go out there to play regardless of their record. They have that battle-tested mentality, mind and heart.
Yeah.
And so you never know what you're going to get as far as the final outcome of an NBA outing.
Yeah, that's why I love NBA. You can have your favorite players, you can have your favorite teams, and no matter who does what, nobody's ever going to measure up to great Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain or Kareem. That's just my opinion. I know everybody has their own flavor of the week. Big C's top 5 NBA rankings. You have the Jazz, and again, this is coming into this morning when everybody woke up this morning. Big C, the Jazz are 38-12, number 1 last week. The Suns 35-14. Big C, they're starting to climb that mountain. They're starting to get back up, and I'm going to leave it at those two. I'm not going to go into the other because they're going to decide on the court tonight down in Phoenix, Arizona, who the best team is in the NBA. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, and that's what it's all about, Charlton. Anybody can come up with a ledger of who they think is the most dominant team in the NBA.
Yeah.
But it comes down to records. It doesn't come down to fanfare because you think one player is better than another.
Yeah.
It's proven on the court in that final outcome when that whistle goes off and the officials have run out of excuses for who they want to call a foul on.
Yeah. It's all fair and love and war. I love this time of year. NBA basketball is fantastic. And what I learned from last night when Steph Curry was doing his thing, next time I take a shower, I'm going to wait till the game is over, and then I'll take a shower, and I don't want to have to miss out on great things that happen. And Big C, I want to touch on African-American sports history. We did a lot of talking about the great college basketball programs going back in the days of the great Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the great Bill Walton, Bill Russell, and, of course, my favorite player is Kareem, but also Wilt Chamberlain. You can't really knock it, no matter who's at the top of that mountain. But in African-American sports history, Big C, we're inspired every day by the accomplishments of these less celebrated black American athletes. Every pro team's Jackie Robinson, Big C. September 28, 1951, Jack Spinks, Alcorn A&M's now Alcorn State. Jack Spinks, number 62, take the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's one of the first 2 African Americans to compete in Pittsburgh, Big C, since the 1930s, and the first black man from Mississippi in the NFL. Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, you can go all the way back to the 50s in the NFL, where great black athletes were changed positions. And you think about Mr. Spinks, Charlton, being the first professional black athlete from the state of Mississippi, one of the most suppressed states in the United States history of black people, Charlton. Mr. Spinks played fullback. You think about that in college. He was a fullback at that university. When he got to the NFL, because he had such great size and to go along with his athleticism, Charlton, They made an offensive lineman out of him.
Yeah.
So when you think about the modern era player in the NFL, Charlton, where they want these athletic pulling guards, Mr. Spinks led the way of that era.
Yeah.
He was a great athlete who rushed for over 1,000 yards 2 consecutive years in college, and they felt that he was not good enough to play running back in the NFL. And he was on the heels of Marion Motley, a huge fullback with the Cleveland Browns,
Yep.
who dominated the NFL in that same division, and he never got that opportunity to shine at that position, Charlton.
Yeah, from Alabama, A&M, now Alcorn State to the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the great Spinks, Big C, and again, doing this in Jim Crow adds another dimension to his greatness. The first African-American player in the state of Mississippi and in Alcorn's history to be drafted in the NFL. He was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers, as you mentioned. Big C, Spinks played and later coached for the Braves. He was also one of the few players to win a championship as a player and a coach, Big C. In honor of Spinks, Alcorn State University named the Braves present football stadium after him. It's called Jack Spinks Stadium. They did that in 1992 to pay homage, Big C. Your thoughts?
You know, we think about African-American universities, historical black colleges, honoring its great legacy of players, Charlton, throughout its history, naming monuments on the campus and stadiums in commemoration of those great black athletes.
Yeah.
We need that same respect from mainstream universities. Only the of Iowa State has named their stadium, Charlton, after a
That's
black
right.
player. We did a show on that a couple of months ago, how institutions should look at the history of black athletes on the college landscape and name arenas and stadiums after. I'm honored that Alcorn State, Charlton, has done that for Mr. Spinks to let his legacy live on.
Yeah, it really is amazing when you see that. Oftentimes, and even just going back over some of the great players that we've talked about, Big C, I think if you take any modern-day player, whether you talk about the Joker, talk about Jokic, whether you talk about a guy like Mike Trout in Major League Baseball, any player in any sport, even if you want to talk about the great Tom Brady, none of these guys had to deal with the pressures of Jim Crow. And I think a lot of them, like I talked about that guy that walked into the gas station today, and he had one leg, and he had a crutch, and he was hopping into the store, and he had a big smile on his face, whistling something with his mask. You know, he had his mask on, but you could tell he was happy. A lot of the players that are considered great now, how do you just your opinion, how would they have fared in Jim Crow, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I don't look at players as greatness today or, in this era. I think what you see with players now is media created. It's like you advocate that Jokic is not an MVP-type player in the NBA.
He's not.
I think it's about what you do under adversity. Jokic had to come from Europe. Not only that, he had to learn a new language, to learn a new culture being in this country. So he has a disadvantage amongst other players in the NBA that were born here in America. When we think about those black players of the past who had to operate under oppression and segregation and threats to their lives and family lives, Charlton, no American, no person should have to deal with that type of stress just to function on a daily basis. America is known that it's been wrong for centuries, Charlton, of how they have treated black people and black athletes. And that still exists today, because you take that jersey off the modern-day black player, and 90% of them's lives are in peril, Charlton, by being on the streets of America through different causes and courses. So we don't always have it easy as black athletes through any era. We are celebrated when we're performing, and we are challenged when we're not entertaining white people.
Well, we got to make our own luck and have our own belief, and it'd be great if everybody had that same belief. It's all fair and love and war. I want to jump to the NHL before we finish out on one of your favorite things to do on greens outside of eating them, if that makes sense to you, Big C. But I know you like ice too, so I'm gonna do this for you, Big C. Gonna finish with some ice stories. NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly believes the Vancouver Canucks, Big C, that they can complete a schedule amid of the COVID-19 outbreak, if you can believe that, Big C. And the team has had 4 games postponed because of the COVID-19 virus, Big C. As of Monday, 17 Canucks players were in the league's COVID-19 protocol, with the addition of rookie forward Niles Hollander, Big C. It marked the 5th straight day that the Canucks list has grown. The 17 players in the protocol at the same time represent the most by one NHL team since the New Jersey Devils had 18 on February 12th. But they're saying iceberg straight ahead, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think this can occur in any sport that's being played, whether it was college basketball. I commend Tim Mulkey, the head coach of the Baylor's University women's basketball program, telling the NCAA not to test the players before the Final Four. Charlton, let those young men play. I think any time that you have extensive testing in any sport that's being played right now, whether it's collegiate or professional, is that you're going to find a rapid rise in COVID-19. There's no way to avoid it as human beings in society. This is a disease that's going to be with us for several years. So if you test the players properly, you're going to come up with COVID-19. The NHL is talking about potentially part of their season being in peril. What do you do with a team, Charlton, or two teams that cannot play the proper criteria for getting into the playoffs, but have a winning percentage to get there?
Like the NCAA did and like the NFL does, they push things down the road to try to get people better. It's all fair and love and war. And speaking of pushing things down the road, the same way the pitch hit deep, right field, back to the wall, home run. We have Major League Baseball. A lot of teams are playing tonight. We really had some doubleheaders. Atlanta at Washington had a doubleheader today. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Kansas City at Cleveland, Big C. Tampa Bay at Boston, beautiful Fenway Park. Minnesota Twins at Detroit. The Toronto Blue Jays at the Texas Rangers. I don't think they have a full ballpark tonight, Big C, and I'm sure Governor Abbott decided he didn't want to show his face around his home state, Big C. Milwaukee at the Chicago Cubs. Take me out to the ball game, the great late Harry Carey, Big C. The LA Dodgers, I guess they're having a lot of time up in Oakland. They've been whipping up on the A's. We'll see if the A's can turn things around tonight. The New York Mets at Phillies, Big C. San Francisco at San Diego. The Chicago White Sox at Seattle. St. Louis is at the beautiful ballpark down in Miami with the Marlins, Big C. You have Baltimore at the New York Yankees, and the Angels of Anaheim, even though they're called the Los Angeles Angels, they're playing the Colorado Rockies. Final story tonight, Big C. It's not the same when I look at the Masters without the great Tiger Woods. Everybody has their own opinion about the Masters, and should they do what baseball did with the All-Star game? I think Masters is going to go on. A lot of people liking Spieth. You know, Johnson did his thing last year, the 2020 Winners Masters Championship, Dustin Johnson. But this to me, Bryson DeChambeau, he's had a tough going at the Masters, never finished in the top 10 at the Masters. And then you look at Jordan Spieth, he's jumped to number 4 from number 29 in just 5 months after he won the Texas Open. I watched the Masters, Big C, but I just got to be honest, it doesn't have the same feeling to me this year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this has been multiple times over the past several years that Tiger Woods has not been a participant in the Masters. This tournament was going before he arrived. It will continue on after his career is ultimately over, Charlton. It's been the signature event on the PGA Tour for decades. You know, it comes under a lot of, scrutiny this year with all the voting rights laws that's been oppressed in the state of Georgia. But people will still show, people will still watch. It is the granddaddy of all golf tournaments. So, I mean, not having Tiger around, yes, it may hurt the ratings, Charlton, but this game will still go on, and you got to look at Dustin Johnson and Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy as being the 3 favorites.
There's a lot of, I love watching this. It's a great tournament, no matter who's playing in it, and it's just a great scenery. But when it comes to social justice, I don't think the Masters is any way in position to take a stance on inequality the way the All-Star game did with Major League Baseball. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the Major League Baseball game, Charlton, being moved, that pressure came from the owners. It didn't solely come from the commissioner, because we know the commissioners are always a spokesperson. And as you think about Rob Manfred, he is a member of the Augusta National Golf Club.
He's a member. He's not going to give that membership up, even though they'll move the baseball All-Star game out of Georgia. It's all fair and love and war. We wish everybody nothing but the best. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble. With all you've got to use, how can you lose, Big C? What are you looking forward to in this boy's universe?
You know, Charlton, that's what Nikolai Jokic is saying. With all the numbers I have that you could use, how can I lose being the MVP of the NBA this year? Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses and doctors and first responders, Charlton. They're always on the winning side of health.
Always on the winning side. You can be on the winning side too when you rise and shine. You can rise and shine every Monday through Friday at 5 or 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As my mom always says, there's never ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.